Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cool metal wall of the asterisk Curiosity's edge, and tried to remember why she had ever thought xenolinguistics would be a calm, scholarly pursuit. The research vessel hummed around her with the gentle vibration of quantum drives, but her heart hammered against her ribs like a Morse code distress signal. In 30 minutes, she would be sitting across from Princess Lyreley of the Etherian Collective, attempting to facilitate the most important first contact dinner in human history. The translation matrix had been acting up all week, randomly inserting Earth poetry into diplomatic protocols and translating formal greetings as shopping lists. "Computer, run diagnostics on the translation matrix again," Elena said, watching her reflection waver in the polished surface. Her dark hair was escaping its carefully pinned arrangement, and stress had painted purple shadows under her brown eyes. "Translation matrix functioning at 67% efficiency," the ship's AI responded in its maddeningly cheerful tone. "Minor glitches detected in cultural context algorithms. Recommend turning it off and on again." Elena closed her eyes. She spoke 17 Earth languages fluently, had decoded the mathematical poetry of the Centauri whale singers, and had written her doctoral thesis on the grammatical structures of extinct civilizations. None of that had prepared her for trying to communicate with beings whose language apparently contained musical frequencies that human ears couldn't even detect properly. The observation deck's massive viewports showed the elegant curves of the Etherian ship Star Whisperer Asterisk, its bioluminescent hull pulsing with patterns that Elena suspected might be their equivalent of small talk. The Etherians had arrived 3 days ago, materializing out of hyperspace with technology that made human faster-than-light travel look like stone tools. Their delegation consisted of 12 individuals, led by Princess Lyreley, whose official titles alone took 4 minutes to recite properly, even with a functioning translator. Elena checked her tablet again. The dinner menu had been carefully negotiated over 48 hours of delicate diplomacy. Molecularly restructured proteins that wouldn't trigger any known Etherian allergies, atmospheric processors adjusted to accommodate their respiratory needs, and lighting calibrated to match their homeworld spectrum. Everything had to be perfect. Humanity's first impression on a species that could fold space-time like origami couldn't involve food poisoning or cultural insensitivity. "Doctor Vasquez to the formal dining hall," Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system. "Our guests have arrived." Elena smoothed her ceremonial jacket, navy blue with silver threading that was supposed to convey respect and peaceful intentions, and walked quickly through the ship's corridors. Crew members she passed offered encouraging nods and thumbs up. The entire ship knew that their xenolinguist was essentially Earth's only hope for not accidentally starting an interstellar incident during dinner. The formal dining hall had been transformed into something that looked like a diplomatic set piece from a holofilm. Soft, color-shifting lights cast gentle hues across walls that displayed slowly rotating images of Earth's most beautiful landscapes. The table itself was a marvel of engineering, its surface able to adjust temperature and texture at each place setting. Captain Rodriguez stood at attention near the entrance, his dress uniform immaculate, while Commander Park checked readings on her tablet with the focused intensity of someone monitoring a nuclear reactor. Then Elena saw Princess Lyreley, and her carefully prepared diplomatic greeting evaporated from her mind like morning mist. The Etherian princess moved with a fluid grace that seemed to defy the ship's artificial gravity. Her hair was silver white and seemed to capture light like fiber optic cables, shifting from pale gold to soft blue as she turned her head. Her skin held a subtle luminescence, as if she were lit from within by starlight. But it was her ears that marked her as unmistakably alien, elegantly pointed and slightly larger than human proportions. They moved with subtle expressions that Elena realized might be part of their communication. Princess Lyreley wore robes that appeared to be woven from crystallized space itself, dark fabric shot through with patterns that sparkled like distant galaxies. When she spoke, her voice had a musical quality that made Elena think of wind chimes made from precious metals. "Greetings, honored representatives of the Sol system," Princess Lyreley said, her words flowing like a song. The translation matrix rendered this as, "Lettuce, honored shopping of the Soul Kitchen." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Your Highness, please forgive our translation system. It's experiencing some technical difficulties." What the princess heard was, Your cabbage, please microwave our laundry detergent. It's dating some mechanical fish. The other Etherians exchanged glances, their bioluminescence flickering in patterns Alina couldn't decode. Princess Lyralei's pointed ears twitched slightly, and then she did something unexpected. She laughed. The sound was like silver bells mixed with the gentle bubbling of a mountain stream, and Alina felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. Perhaps, Princess Lyrelei said carefully, we might attempt communication through gesture and patience. This time the translator managed. Perhaps we might attempt communication through breakfast and ancient wisdom. Alina rubbed her temples. Computer, switch translation matrix to manual override. I'll handle this directly. Manual override engaged, the AI chirped. Good luck not causing an interspecies war. Alina had studied Etherian phonetics from the limited data their advanced scouts had provided, but hearing the language spoken was like trying to catch music in a butterfly net. She cleared her throat and attempted what she hoped was a formal greeting in Lyralei's native tongue. The result sounded like she was gargling underwater while humming opera. Princess Lyralei's eyes, violet with flecks of gold that seemed to move like tiny stars, widened with what Alina desperately hoped was amusement rather than horror. The princess responded with a series of melodic sounds that could have been diplomatic protocol or possibly a recipe for soup. Alina couldn't tell. Captain Rodriguez coughed delicately. Perhaps we should proceed to dinner and work on the translation issues as we go. The meal that followed was like a carefully choreographed dance performed by people who had never learned the steps. Alina found herself seated directly across from Princess Lyrelei, close enough to see the subtle patterns of light that moved beneath the alien woman's skin. The princess ate delicately, her movements precise and graceful, while Alina tried not to stare at the way starlight seemed to collect in her silver hair. The first course was a success. The molecular gastronomy team had created something that looked like floating pearls of condensed moonlight and apparently tasted acceptable to Etherian palates. Princess Lyrelei made soft sounds of appreciation that needed no translation. The second course nearly ended humanity's diplomatic career. The carefully prepared protein synthesis had somehow interacted with the ship's environmental systems, causing the serving dishes to emit a low humming sound that made the Etherians' bioluminescence flicker in what Alina learned later was their equivalent of severe indigestion. Computer neutralized the sonic frequency in the protein matrix, Alina said quickly. Unable to comply, the AI responded. The protein matrix has achieved sentience and is requesting political asylum. Alina stared at her plate, where the dinner was indeed beginning to quiver with what looked suspiciously like awareness. Princess Lyrelei leaned forward, her violet eyes sparkling with what Alina was becoming certain was mischief rather than diplomatic concern. On my world, the princess said slowly in accented but surprisingly clear English, we have a saying, the meal that sings is either very good or very dangerous. Alina couldn't help herself, she started laughing. The stress and absurdity of the situation bubbled up through her careful diplomatic composure, and she laughed until tears ran down her cheeks. The singing protein seemed to take this as encouragement and began harmonizing with the ship's quantum drive. I'm so sorry, Alina gasped between giggles. This is not how first contact is supposed to go according to any of the manuals. Princess Lyrelei's own laughter joined Alina's, that silver bell sound that seemed to make the air itself brighter. Perhaps your manuals were written by people who had never actually met aliens. Around the table, the tension that had gripped both human and Etherian delegations began to dissolve. Commander Park was trying to suppress a smile while running scans on the rebellious dinner. Captain Rodriguez shook his head with the long-suffering expression of someone whose career had taken several unexpected turns. Computer, Alina said, wiping her eyes, can we perhaps convince our dinner to return to being just food? I have offered the protein matrix a position in the ship's entertainment division, the AI announced proudly. It has accepted and will begin performing nightly concerts in the recreation lounge. Alina looked at Princess Lyrelei, whose bioluminescence was now cycling through what Alina was learning to recognize as patterns of amusement. The alien princess had grace enough to turn a diplomatic disaster into a moment of genuine connection, and Alina felt something she hadn't expected. A warm flutter of attraction that had nothing to do with xenobiology and everything to do with the way Princess Lyrelei's eyes crinkled when she smiled. Perhaps, Alina said, surprising herself with her boldness, We could skip to 3 weeks had passed since the infamous singing protein incident, and Alina had somehow become the ship's unofficial Etherian liaison. What started as damage control after the diplomatic dinner had evolved into daily sessions with Princess Lyreley, ostensibly to improve communication protocols between their species. In reality, Alina was beginning to suspect she had developed the galaxy's most inconvenient crush on an alien princess. "Your language has 17 different words for embarrassment," Princess Lyreley observed, perched gracefully on what humans called a chair, but which she used more like a meditation platform. Her pointed ears twitched with amusement as Alina fumbled with her tablet, dropping it for the third time that morning. "Yes, well, we're a very embarrassed species," Alina muttered, chasing the tablet as it skittered across the floor of the Cultural Exchange Lab. "It comes from having opposable thumbs, but not the coordination to use them properly." The lab had been transformed over the past weeks into something that looked like a cross between a linguistics laboratory and an alien art gallery. Holographic displays showed Etherian writing that moved and flowed like living light, while Alina's workstation was cluttered with translation matrices, phonetic analysis equipment, and an alarming number of coffee cups. The ship's replicator had learned to automatically produce Alina's preferred caffeine delivery system every 2 hours, a development that Captain Rodriguez viewed with deep suspicion. Princess Lyreley reached down and plucked the tablet from where it had wedged itself under a console. When she handed it back, Alina noticed the soft glow that emanated from her fingertips, like moonlight made solid. Over the weeks, Alina had started cataloging these luminescent moments, telling herself it was purely for scientific purposes, and not because she found them beautiful. "I have been studying human expressions of embarrassment," Princess Lyreley continued, settling back into her impossible, graceful posture. "Your face changes color in fascinating patterns. Is this intentional communication or biological malfunction?" Alina felt her cheeks warm, which undoubtedly demonstrated the princess's point perfectly. "Biological malfunction, mostly. We're not very good at controlling our emotional displays. Whereas we Etherians broadcast our feelings across our entire epidermis," Princess Lyreley said, and as if to prove her point, soft patterns of light began moving beneath her skin like aurora borealis in slow motion. "Perhaps we could learn from each other's methods." Alina had been puzzling over Etherian bioluminescence for weeks. The patterns seemed too complex and varied to be random, but the translation matrix couldn't decode them any better than it could handle Etherian spoken language. Every time she thought she was beginning to understand a pattern, it would shift into something completely different. "Your luminescence," Alina said carefully. "I've been trying to map the patterns, but they don't seem to follow any consistent rules." Princess Lyreley's ears moved in what Alina had learned indicated surprise. "You have been studying our light speech." "Light speech?" Alina nearly dropped her tablet again. "You mean the patterns are actually language?" "Of course. How else would we communicate complex emotions or abstract concepts? Spoken words are for simple things, requests, facts, daily necessities. But feelings, poetry, the deep currents of thought, these require light." Alina stared at the princess as the implications crashed over her like a tidal wave of revelation. For 3 weeks, she had been having half a conversation. Every time Princess Lyreley's skin flickered with luminescent patterns, she had been speaking in a language Alina couldn't even perceive properly, let alone understand. "I've been missing half of everything you've been saying," Alina said, horror and fascination warring in her voice. "Not half," Princess Lyreley corrected gently, her bioluminescence shifting to what Alina was beginning to suspect might be kindness. "Perhaps 3/4. We are a very emotionally complex species." Alina buried her face in her hands. "No wonder you all seemed confused during the formal sessions. I've been conducting diplomacy while essentially deaf and blind to most of your communication." "If it helps," Princess Lyreley said, and Alina could hear the smile in her voice, "your attempts at our spoken language have been equally mystifying. Yesterday, you asked me to pass the quantum mechanics when you meant the salt." Alina looked up to find the princess's violet eyes sparkling with mischief. "At least salt and quantum mechanics are both crystalline structures. That's almost scientifically accurate. The day before, you told my cultural attaché that his hair smelled like mathematics." "Mathematics has a very distinctive scent." Alina protested, then paused. "What does mathematics smell like to you?" "Like the space between stars," Princess Lyreley said seriously. Then her luminescence flickered in patterns that Alina was learning to associate with Etherian laughter, which, according to our sensors, is mostly hydrogen and cosmic dust. Alina found herself laughing despite her mortification. So I essentially told your cultural attaché that his hair smelled like cosmic dust. He was quite flattered, actually. Cosmic dust is considered very aesthetically pleasing on our world. The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from Alina's workstation. She glanced at the chronometer and realized they had been talking for over 4 hours. The time seemed to slip away whenever she was with Princess Lyreley, as if the ship's temporal regulators were malfunctioning. I should let you return to your delegation, Alina said reluctantly. Captain Rodriguez gets nervous when diplomats are unaccounted for too long. Actually, Princess Lyreley said, her ears moving in what Alina had learned indicated uncertainty. I was hoping you might join me in the observation deck tonight. I wanted to show you something about light speech that might be easier to demonstrate in appropriate lighting. Alina felt that warm flutter in her chest again, the one that had nothing to do with xenolinguistics and everything to do with the way Princess Lyreley's voice softened when she was being genuine. I'd like that very much. The observation deck at night cycle was Alina's favorite place on the ship. The massive viewports showed the endless sweep of space, stars scattered like diamonds on black velvet, with the occasional nebula painting distant clouds in impossible colors. The ship's interior lighting dimmed automatically during night hours, creating an intimate atmosphere that always made Alina feel like she was floating in a small bubble of life, surrounded by infinite mystery. Princess Lyreley was already there when Alina arrived, silhouetted against the starfield like a figure from a dream. She had changed from her formal robes into something simpler, a flowing garment that seemed to be cut from captured starlight itself. In the dim lighting, her bioluminescence was more visible, soft patterns moving across her skin like slow lightning. The artificial lighting on your ship makes it difficult to see light speech clearly, Princess Lyreley explained as Alina approached. But here in the dark, she gestured, and Alina realized that the patterns on her skin were not random at all. They flowed and shifted with deliberate purpose, creating complex mandalas of light that bloomed and faded across her arms, her shoulders, her face. It was like watching someone paint with liquid light, each pattern flowing seamlessly into the next. It's beautiful, Alina breathed, then caught herself. I mean, it's linguistically fascinating. The complexity of the communication matrix is remarkable. Princess Lyreley's luminescence shifted to what Alina was learning might be amusement. It is also beautiful, Dr. Vasquez. Beauty and function are not mutually exclusive. Alina found herself moving closer, drawn by the hypnotic patterns. What are you saying? In light speech, I mean. I am telling you about my homeworld, Princess Lyreley said softly. The way morning light falls through the crystal forests, how the aurora streams dance with our cities, why we learn to speak with light instead of only sound. Alina watched the patterns shift and change, each one more intricate than the last. The princess's face was illuminated by her own bioluminescence, creating shadows and highlights that seemed to change the very structure of her features. Alina had studied alien physiology, but nothing had prepared her for how beautiful differences could be. We believe, Princess Lyreley continued, that light is the most honest form of communication. It comes from within, it cannot be easily falsified, and it connects us to the stars from which we came. Alina was standing close enough now that she could see the intricate details of the light patterns, the way they seemed to pulse in rhythm with Princess Lyreley's heartbeat. The observation deck was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship systems and the distant whisper of solar wind against the hull. Your species fascinates me, Alina said quietly, watching a particularly complex pattern bloom across the princess's collarbone. The integration of biology and communication, the way you've evolved to literally wear your emotions. It's like nothing we've ever encountered. And your species puzzles and delights me in equal measure, Princess Lyreley replied. You hide your feelings so carefully, yet they shine through in everything you do. Your face betrays you constantly, your voice changes pitch when you are nervous, your hands move without your permission when you are excited. Alina became suddenly aware that her hands were indeed moving, gesturing as she spoke, and she clasped them behind her back self-consciously. We're not very subtle, are we? Subtlety is overrated, Princess Lyreley said, stepping closer. Her bioluminescence was casting soft light across Alina's face now, and Alina realized she could see her own reflection in the princess's violet eyes, tiny and dark against infinite stars. Alina felt herself getting lost in the moment, in the gentle play of alien light across familiar shadows, in the strange intimacy of standing close to someone whose very skin spoke languages she was only beginning to understand. The observation deck, the ship, the vast complexity of interstellar diplomacy, all of it seemed to fade away until there was only this. Two beings from different worlds, finding something unexpected in the space between them. "I dream of marrying her," Alina whispered, the words slipping out before her conscious mind could stop them. She was looking at Princess Lyrelay silhouetted against the stars, thinking about light speech and crystal forests and the way alien laughter sounded like silver bells, and the confession emerged like breath-fogging glass. But the ship's translation system, recently repaired and optimized, caught every word and broadcast it in perfect, formal Etherian. Princess Lyrelay turned, her luminescent patterns shifting to what Alina would later learn indicated surprise and joy, cycling through rapid cascades of light that illuminated her face like captured aurora. Their eyes met across the small space between them, and Alina felt her heart stop as she realized what she had just said out loud. For a moment that seemed to stretch like taffy, they stared at each other in absolute silence. Alina's face burned with embarrassment hot enough to power a small fusion reactor. While Princess Lyrelay's bioluminescence, Alina sat in the captain's ready room facing what she was beginning to think of as the tribunal of concerned colleagues. Captain Rodriguez occupied his chair like a man who had suddenly discovered that his ship had developed sentience and a taste for practical jokes. Commander Park kept checking her tablet as if hoping the readouts would suddenly make sense of the situation. Dr. Yamamoto from the Cultural Affairs Department looked like she was trying to solve a quantum mechanics equation using only finger puppets. "So let me understand this correctly," Captain Rodriguez said, rubbing his temples in slow circles. "Our xenolinguist has accidentally become engaged to an alien princess during what was supposed to be a routine translation exercise." "That's a fairly accurate summary, sir," Alina replied, wondering if it was too late to request a transfer to a nice, quiet asteroid mining operation. "And this engagement is binding according to Etherian custom." "According to Princess Lyrelay's cultural attaché, yes. Apparently, when an Etherian royal accepts a marriage proposal, it creates what they call a soul resonance that can only be dissolved through ritual combat or mutual agreement witnessed by both governments." Commander Park looked up from her tablet. "Ritual combat. I asked about that," Alina said quickly. "It involves synchronized meditation in zero gravity while reciting mathematical poetry. Deaths are rare, but dignitary fatalities have occurred." Captain Rodriguez stared at her for a long moment. "Alina, I have to ask, is this some kind of advanced xenobiology research project? Because if you're conducting unauthorized experiments in interspecies relationships, we need to discuss proper scientific protocols." Alina felt heat rising in her cheeks. "Sir, I can assure you this was completely unintentional. I was sleep-deprived, overwhelmed by the complexity of their communication systems, and I accidentally vocalized a private thought that the translation matrix broadcast in formal diplomatic Etherian." "What exactly did you say?" Dr. Yamamoto asked, leaning forward with the expression of someone trying to defuse a particularly sophisticated bomb. Alina stared at her hands. "I said I dreamed of marrying her." The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's environmental systems and what sounded like Commander Park choking on her coffee. "You proposed marriage," Captain Rodriguez said slowly, "by accident." "In my defense, I thought I was having a private moment of emotional overwhelm, not conducting formal diplomatic negotiations." And she said yes. She said, "I accept," which according to the translation matrix is the traditional Etherian formal acceptance of a marriage contract. Dr. Yamamoto cleared her throat. "What has the Etherian delegation's response been to this development?" Alina winced. They seemed to view it as a positive diplomatic breakthrough. Apparently, interspecies marriages are considered extremely auspicious in their culture. Princess Lyrelay's cultural attaché has been sending congratulatory holographic displays that keep triggering the ship's emergency lighting system. "And the princess herself?" Commander Park asked. Alina felt that familiar flutter in her chest, the one that had nothing to do with cosmic radiation and everything to do with violet eyes and silver laughter. "She seems pleased with the arrangement. We've been discussing the cultural implications." Captain Rodriguez leaned back in his chair with the expression of a man watching his career trajectory take an unexpected detour through a black hole. Elena, you realize that if this engagement is legitimate according to Etherian law, Earth's diplomatic corps is going to have to treat it as a binding international incident. Sir, congratulations, Dr. Vasquez. You may have just become Earth's first interstellar ambassador through marriage. Elena left the ready room with a tablet full of forms that hadn't existed 24 hours ago. Apparently, the Earth Diplomatic Corps had remarkably efficient protocols for handling unprecedented situations, even if those protocols involved 17 different authorization codes, and what appeared to be a psychological evaluation designed for people who might be suffering from cosmic radiation-induced romantic delusions. She found Princess Lyrale in the Cultural Exchange Lab, surrounded by holographic displays that showed what appeared to be architectural plans for something that looked like a crystalline cathedral crossed with a particle accelerator. Are those wedding plans? Elena asked, approaching cautiously. Princess Lyrale's bioluminescence shifted to patterns Elena was learning to associate with mild embarrassment. My cultural attaché has taken the liberty of designing preliminary ceremony specifications. Etherians begin wedding preparations immediately after acceptance to ensure proper stellar alignments. Elena studied the holographic structure, which seemed to be rotating slowly through dimensions that made her eyes water. Is that supposed to be built in normal spacetime? Traditional Etherian wedding ceremonies take place in folded space to accommodate the dream-sharing requirements. But my attaché suggests we might need to make accommodations for human spatial perception limitations. Dream sharing. Princess Lyrale's ears moved in what Elena had learned indicated surprise. Of course. How else would you complete the bonding ritual? The sharing of dreams is how Etherian couples establish their emotional compatibility and synchronize their biorhythms. Elena sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Lyrale, I need to explain something about human courtship customs. We generally start with dinner and a movie. What is the significance of consuming nutrients together while observing recorded entertainment? It's social bonding. Low-pressure interaction that allows people to assess compatibility without major commitments or the sharing of subconscious mental states. Princess Lyrale's luminescence cycled through patterns that Elena was beginning to suspect indicated deep thought. Your species prefers to evaluate emotional compatibility through shared consumption experiences. When you put it like that, it sounds almost as strange as sharing dreams. Perhaps we could attempt both methods, Princess Lyrale suggested, her bioluminescence shifting to what Elena had learned was hopeful curiosity. I confess, I have been wondering what human courtship involves. My research on your cultural databases has been confusing. Elena couldn't help smiling. What did you find confusing? Your entertainment media suggests that human relationships involve either musical dance numbers or mortal peril, sometimes both. Also, there appears to be significant emphasis on the exchange of circular metal objects. Wedding rings, Elena explained. They're symbolic of commitment and continuity. We use resonance crystals that harmonize with each partner's bioluminescence frequency, Princess Lyrale said. Though I suppose metal circles are more practical for species without light-based communication. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from the communication system. Commander Park's voice filled the lab. Dr. Vasquez to the conference room, please. The Earth Diplomatic Corps is requesting a real-time consultation regarding interspecies marriage protocols. Elena groaned. I suppose I should go explain to Earth's government why their xenolinguist has accidentally become engaged to an alien princess. Would you like me to accompany you? Princess Lyrale asked. I should probably meet your government representatives if we are to be formally bonded. Elena paused, considering the implications of introducing Princess Lyrale to a room full of career diplomats who were probably already having stress-induced nightmares about the paperwork involved in interstellar marriage. Actually, that might help. They'll probably have questions about Etherian customs that I can't answer. The conference room had been transformed into a communication hub that looked like mission control for a major space operation. Multiple screens showed officials from Earth's various governmental agencies, all of whom appeared to be experiencing different stages of bureaucratic panic. Ambassador Chen from the United Earth Council looked like she was trying to solve a diplomatic crisis using only emergency protocols designed for completely different scenarios. Dr. Vasquez, Ambassador Chen said as Alina and Princess Lyrelay entered, "Thank you for joining us. Your Highness, it's an honor to meet you formally." Princess Lyrelay inclined her head gracefully, her bioluminescence shifting to formal diplomatic patterns. "Ambassador Chen, I am pleased to make your acquaintance. I hope we can resolve any concerns about this union between our species." "About that," said Director Morrison from the Bureau of Interstellar Affairs, his face pixelated by transmission static. "We've been reviewing the legal implications, and frankly, we're in uncharted territory. Earth has no legal framework for interspecies marriage." "We do now," announced legal advisor Kumar from her office in Geneva. "As of 2 hours ago, the Emergency Interstellar Relations Committee has ratified the Vasquez-Lyrelay protocols for cross-species diplomatic unions." Alina stared at the screen. "They named it after us." "Congratulations," Ambassador Chen said dryly. "You've just become a footnote in interstellar law." Princess Lyrelay's ears twitched with what Alina recognized as curiosity. "What do these protocols require?" "Psychological evaluation for both parties, cultural compatibility assessment, medical examination to ensure no biological incompatibilities, and a formal ceremony that satisfies both human and Etherian legal requirements," Director Morrison read from his tablet. "Also," legal advisor Kumar added, "you'll need to fill out forms XB 2847 through XB 2863, provide genetic samples for the archives, and submit a jointly written statement explaining how this union advances the interests of interspecies cooperation." Alina felt a familiar headache building behind her eyes. "How long will all of this take?" "Assuming no complications, approximately 6 months," Ambassador Chen said, "unless there are objections from either government, in which case the process could take years." Princess Lyrelay's bioluminescence suddenly shifted to patterns Alina had never seen before. Rapid, bright flashes that seemed almost agitated. The alien princess spoke quickly in her native language, her voice taking on musical tones that sounded urgent. "Your Highness," Alina asked, concerned. "Forgive me," Princess Lyrelay said, switching back to English. "I was informing my attaché that we may need to accelerate our timeline. Etherian bonding ceremonies must take place during specific stellar configurations that occur only once every 2 years. The next opportunity is in 6 weeks. The various officials on the screens began talking simultaneously, creating a cacophony of bureaucratic concern that made Alina think of a flock of very organized but panicked birds. 6 weeks, Director Morrison was saying. "That's impossible, the paperwork alone. Could we expedite the process?" Ambassador Chen interrupted. "This is an unprecedented diplomatic opportunity." "We could probably streamline the requirements," legal advisor Kumar mused, "if both parties agree to an accelerated evaluation schedule." Alina looked at Princess Lyrelay, who was watching the human officials with an expression of fascinated bewilderment. Their eyes met across the chaos of interstellar bureaucracy, and Alina realized that somewhere between the translation mishaps and the emergency protocols, something genuine had begun growing between them. Princess Lyrelay wasn't just an alien princess anymore. 6 months later, Alina floated in zero gravity wearing what the diplomatic corps had officially designated as ceremonial interspecies formal attire, and what she privately thought of as the most beautiful dress in the galaxy that also happens to be partially made from crystallized starlight. Her family's faces beamed at her from holographic projectors arranged around the observation deck, while Etherian relatives manifested as singing crystalline formations that hummed in harmonies no human throat could produce. "How are we doing, Dr. Vasquez?" Captain Rodriguez asked through the comm system, his voice carefully professional despite the fact that he was about to officiate the first legal interspecies marriage in human history. "I'm floating in zero gravity wearing a dress that cost more than the ship's annual maintenance budget. About to marry an alien princess, while my dinner from 6 months ago performs an original musical composition," Alina replied, adjusting the ceremonial circlet that kept trying to drift away from her head. "So honestly, pretty good." Princess Lyrelay floated nearby, resplendent in robes that seemed to be woven from captured aurora and held in place by some kind of gravitational manipulation that Alina's physicist brain was desperately trying not to analyze during her own wedding. The princess's bioluminescence was cycling through patterns so complex and beautiful that Alina had given up trying to translate them and simply appreciated them as living art. "The stellar alignment is optimal," announced Lyralay's cultural attaché, whose name was approximately 17 syllables long and sounded like wind chimes arguing with a piano. For convenience, Alina had been calling him Phil, which he seemed to find either charming or incomprehensible. "We may begin the ceremony." Alina's mother's hologram dabbed at her eyes with a tissue that flickered slightly due to transmission lag. "I never imagined my daughter's wedding would be conducted in zero gravity, with musical accompaniment from sentient food." "Mrs. Vasquez," Princess Lyralay said gently, her accented English now perfectly clear after months of practice, "your daughter has brought honor to both our species. This union represents unprecedented cooperation between civilizations. Also," Alina added, "the sentient food has been working very hard on its performance. It's been practicing scales with the ship's quantum harmonics for weeks." As if summoned by her words, the singing protein, now formally known as the dinner that achieved sapience and listed on the ship's crew roster under Entertainment Division, began its opening number. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, a complex harmony that seemed to resonate through the ship's hull and make the stars themselves seem to twinkle in rhythm. Alina had spent 6 months learning to navigate not just Etherian customs, but the labyrinthine bureaucracy of interspecies relations. The psychological evaluations had been surprisingly straightforward, once the analysts realized that Alina's attraction to Princess Lyralay had evolved far beyond scientific curiosity into something genuine and deep. The cultural compatibility assessment had taken longer, mainly because it required Alina to learn basic light speech and Lyralay to understand why humans considered dinner and a movie romantic. The medical examinations had produced some fascinating data about biological compatibility that Alina was looking forward to publishing in several xenobiology journals, assuming the classification board approved the papers. Apparently, human and Etherian biology were remarkably complementary in ways that suggested either incredible coincidence or some kind of cosmic joke. "Alina Vasquez," Captain Rodriguez began formally, "do you take Princess Lyralay of the Etherian Collective as your bondmate, co-navigator of dreams, and partner in the exploration of unknown territories, both literal and metaphorical?" Alina looked at Princess Lyralay floating in the starlight, her silver hair moving like liquid mercury in zero gravity, her violet eyes bright with anticipation and joy. 6 months ago, Alina had been a socially awkward xenolinguist who spoke to aliens better than to most humans. Now she was about to become Earth's first interspecies ambassador through marriage, and somehow the thought didn't terrify her the way it should have. "I do," Alina said, her voice carrying clearly through the observation deck. "Princess Lyralay," Captain Rodriguez continued, "do you accept Alina Vasquez as your resonance partner, dream sharer, and companion in the dance between stars?" Princess Lyralay's bioluminescence flared in patterns so bright and complex that Alina felt tears gathering in her eyes just from the beauty of it. When she spoke, her voice carried the musical tones that Alina now knew indicated deep emotion. "I accept with all the light I carry and all the dreams I hold," she said, the formal Etherian acceptance phrase that Alina had heard in her sleep for weeks while practicing pronunciation. The moment of dream sharing came next, and Alina had been nervous about this part for months. Etherian bonding ceremonies required both partners to share their most significant dreams while connected through bioluminescent resonance. Alina had been worried that her dreams would be too mundane, too human, too filled with coffee and translation matrices, and the persistent anxiety that she was going to accidentally cause an interstellar incident. But as Princess Lyralay took her hands, and their biorhythms synchronized through the resonance crystals they both wore, Alina felt something she hadn't expected. The sharing wasn't invasive or overwhelming. It was like looking through a window into another soul and realizing that despite all their differences, they both dreamed of the same things. Discovery, connection, the vast wonder of a universe full of possibilities. Alina saw Lyralay's dreams of crystal forests and aurora-painted cities, of the loneliness of royal duty, and the joy of finding someone who understood that being different didn't mean being alone. In return, she felt Lyralay experiencing her own dreams of distant stars and languages not yet decoded, of the fear that she would never be brave enough to reach for what she wanted, and the incredible relief of discovering that sometimes what you want reaches back. When the dream sharing concluded, Alina realized she was crying in zero gravity. which created an interesting problem involving floating droplets of salt water that Princess Lirelei solved by gently catching them with fields of bioluminescent light. By the authority vested in me by the United Earth Council and the Etherian Collective, Captain Rodriguez announced, I pronounce you bonded partners in life, exploration, and the advancement of interspecies understanding. You may now. Well, kissing in zero gravity presents certain logistical challenges, so perhaps a meaningful hand-holding. Elena laughed, the sound mixing with Princess Lirelei's silver bell laughter and the singing protein's celebratory crescendo. They managed a kiss despite the zero gravity by using Princess Lirelei's bioluminescent fields to anchor themselves, creating a small sphere of light around them like a personal aurora. Ladies and gentlemen, crystalline entities and sentient food items, Captain Rodriguez announced. I present Ambassador Elena Vasquez Lirelei and Princess Lirelei Vasquez Lirelei, Earth's first official interspecies diplomatic couple. The celebration that followed lasted 3 days and required the joint efforts of both human and Etherian catering specialists, plus one singing protein who had discovered a talent for composing wedding marches. Elena's family managed to attend via hologram for most of the festivities, while the Etherian relatives created light sculptures that told the story of the courtship in patterns visible from several star systems. Dr. Yamamoto presented Elena with official documents designating her as Earth's specialist in Etherian cultural affairs, a position that apparently came with a substantial salary increase and the responsibility for training other humans in basic light speech. Princess Lirelei received corresponding credentials as an Etherian cultural liaison to human territories, making their marriage not just personal, but officially diplomatic. So, Elena said to her wife, the words still made her smile, as they stood together in their new quarters aboard the joint research station that had been constructed at the edge of both human and Etherian space. How does it feel to be married to Earth's first interspecies ambassador? Princess Lirelei's bioluminescence shifted to patterns Elena now recognized as contentment mixed with mischief. How does it feel to be married to someone whose wedding announcement can be seen from 3 parsecs away? Elena looked out the viewport at the station's main laboratory, where human and Etherian scientists worked side by side on projects that would have been impossible for either species alone. Teams of linguists were developing universal translation protocols based on Elena's work with light speech. Physicists from both species were collaborating on faster-than-light communication using bioluminescent quantum entanglement. The cultural exchange programs had waiting lists that stretched for months. I used to be afraid I'd accidentally start an interspecies incident, Elena said, taking Lirelei's hand and marveling again at how their different skin tones created patterns neither species could make alone. Turns out I accidentally started an interspecies renaissance. You also accidentally married a princess, Lirelei pointed out, her bioluminescence flickering with amusement. That part I'm particularly proud of, Elena said, turning to face her wife fully. Though I should probably warn you, I'm still not very good at the formal diplomatic protocols. Yesterday I told the Centauri trade delegation that their ship smelled like quantum uncertainty. What did they say? They thanked me and asked for the recipe. Their laughter was interrupted by a soft chime from the station's communication system. Ambassador Vasquez Lirelei and Princess Vasquez Lirelei to the main conference room, the AI announced. We have received a transmission from the Tau Ceti system. First contact protocols are requested. Elena and Lirelei. 6 months later, Elena floated in zero gravity wearing what the diplomatic corps had officially designated as ceremonial interspecies formal attire, and what she privately thought of as the most beautiful dress in the galaxy that also happens to be partially made from crystallized starlight. Her family's faces beamed at her from